All right, let's just jump right into this explainer and tackle what's honestly the ultimate mystery. How come there are minds? I mean, picture the early universe for a second. It was basically nothing but rocks, gas, and blind mathematical physics. So how is it actually possible for minds to eventually evolve from completely mindless processes and then turn around and ask how they were created in the first place? It's wild, right? Based on Dennett's brilliant deep dive into cognitive science and evolutionary biology, we're going to trace this breathtaking journey from single-celled organisms all the way up to the staggering genius of human beings. Dennett was a giant in philosophy, and honestly, his frameworks completely rewire how we view our own existence.
Think about the device you're watching this on right now. Think about the insane level of engineering required to build a microchip, or the pure creativity needed to compose a symphony. It forces us to confront the sheer, staggering magnitude of human intelligence compared to literally every other living thing. If the universe started off completely devoid of purpose, thought, or intention, how do we explain consciousness? How do we explain art, science, or the very ability to even ponder our own origins? How did atomic dust somehow organize itself into a brain capable of asking why?
To navigate this wild path through a jungle of science and philosophy, we're going to follow 4 paradigm-shifting steps. We'll hit the magic of minds, the Cartesian trap, reverse engineering life, and finally, reasons without reasoners.
Part 1, the magic of minds. We'll start at the absolute beginning of complex life to see just how incredibly rare and powerful our minds truly are.
It's super crucial to understand that evolution fundamentally depends on amplifying these impossibly rare events to build complexity over billions of years. For the first 2 billion years of Earth's history, life consisted entirely of simple single-celled organisms just kind of floating aimlessly. But then, this amazing thing happened. 2 completely different cells collided. One engulfed the other, but instead of digesting it, they formed a symbiotic partnership. Imagine 2 blind, simple machines bumping into each other in the dark, and instead of destroying each other, their parts perfectly mesh to form an entirely new, incredibly powerful supermachine. That's exactly what happened. This was the eukaryotic revolution. It was a 1 in a billion technological merger that gave evolution its first great boost, paving the way for all plants, animals, and eventually, us.
Now, fast forward to today, and the results of that evolutionary timeline are, well, almost terrifying. Consider the Mackety explosion. About 10,000 years ago, right at the dawn of agriculture, the worldwide human population, plus our livestock and pets, accounted for just 0.1% of the terrestrial vertebrate biomass. Today, that number has skyrocketed to 98%. 98! Think about how incredibly short 10,000 years is against the 4 billion-year backdrop of Earth's history. In a mere 500 human generations, which is an absolute blink of an eye in evolutionary time, we've fundamentally taken over the planet's biology.
So how did we pull off this total biological domination? It's all because of this elaborate kit of thinking tools we've invented. We aren't just biologically smart, you know. Our biological hardware actually hasn't changed much in those 10,000 years. What changed is our cultural software. We rely on spoken words, reading, writing, map-making, all the way up to computers and the internet. These tools allow us to extract and manipulate information in ways no other species can even conceptualize. The gap between us and the rest of the animal kingdom is just vast. Dogs don't know there are bacteria. We do. But to figure out exactly how we bridge that massive gap from single cells to the internet, we first have to clear a pretty major mental hurdle.
Step 2. The Cartesian trap. Breaking the illusion of the immaterial soul. Because to understand how these minds actually work, we first have to slay a philosophical monster that tricks almost everyone.
We all instinctively feel like our minds are these magical, immaterial things living inside our bodies. It feels like you're a tiny pilot sitting right behind your eyes, driving a meat suit, doesn't it? This idea was formalized by the 17th century scientist René Descartes, who believed the mind was a miracle, a thinking thing, completely separate from the physical laws governing lungs or hearts. This doctrine is called Cartesian dualism, and it created what we call the Cartesian wound, a deep severance between mind and body. It's an incredibly powerful illusion because it perfectly matches our everyday lived experience. Our inner voice feels so detached from the physical biology of our brains that we just naturally assume they must belong to entirely different realms.
But science tells us the exact opposite. Francis Crick, the co-discoverer of DNA, called this materialistic view the astonishing hypothesis. He argued that your joys, your memories, your sense of personal identity, it's all just the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells and molecules, your wetware. Yet, actually confronting this causes immense emotional turmoil for a lot of people.
It triggers this deep existential dread. We fear that if we're just complex biological machines without a magical, immaterial soul, then life, love, and art somehow lose their meaning. Whether that dread is justified or not, the psychological resistance to being purely biological is intense. We fiercely fight against this truth.
Think about the famous duck-rabbit illusion, where your brain just suddenly snaps back and forth between two distinct images. Well, a force we can call Cartesian gravity does the exact same thing to us when we view our own minds. It pulls us into the first-person defender perspective. We feel so intimately acquainted with our own thoughts, our own joys and pains, that it feels literally impossible they could just be chemical reactions firing in the dark. We get locked into this egocentric point of view from the inside, desperately defending the magic of our own consciousness against cold, hard biology.
And the crazy thing is, even brilliant scientists, armed with decades of neurobiological data, get flipped by this Cartesian gravity. It's just like staring at a Necker cube, where the front face will suddenly, involuntarily snap to become the back face. Your perception shifts instantly. The exact same thing happens to researchers. They approach the brain objectively, analyzing neurons and synapses. But suddenly, the sheer force of their own subjective experience snaps them back. They find themselves completely unable to look at consciousness objectively from the outside. The pull of our own inner lives distorts our imagination, making the gap between physical matter and conscious experience seem like an unbridgeable, magical chasm.
Moving to Part 3, Reverse Engineering Life. Finding brilliant design without a designer. To break this spell and see past the illusion, we need to travel all the way back to the prebiotic world and look at the origin of life itself.
By reverse engineering life step by step, we can actually prove that you do not need an intelligent designer to get brilliantly complex design. Think of it like reverse engineering an alien smartphone you found buried out in the desert. You wouldn't just assume it popped into existence by magic, right? You'd look at the battery, examine the screen, and figure out the logical sequence of its assembly from basic elements. If you want to know how the first reproducing cell came to be, you apply that exact same logic. You list the minimum functions required, like capturing energy and reproducing. Then you inventory the raw chemical materials actually available on early Earth, and you work backward. You look for a completely non-miraculous step-by-step sequence of combinations. It's a pure algorithmic process.
For example, when you see incredibly perfect, highly ordered stone circles scattered across the freezing landscape of Spitsbergen, your brain instantly screams, "Someone built this, someone designed this." I mean, it looks entirely man-made. It looks purposefully arranged by some intelligent artist trying to convey a message. Let that mystery linger for a second, because the wild truth is, there was no artist.
What this actually reveals is a natural algorithm at work. Kessler and Werner's model proves that completely blind, mindless cycles of freezing, expanding, and thawing act like a giant, natural sorting machine. If you just tweak basic parameters like stone size, moisture, and temperature, and let the ground freeze and melt over 900 cycles, these intricate rings and polygons just naturally emerge. There's no intention here, no blueprint, just a blind loop repeating over and over, creating mathematical perfection without any designer at all.
It perfectly illustrates the famous saying by evolutionary biologist Leslie Orgel, "Evolution is cleverer than you are." Contrast human research and development with nature's. Human engineers are impatient, their budgets are super tight, and they need immediate results. Nature, on the other hand, has absolutely no shame, no budget, and quite literally all the time in the world. It has billions of years to fail and try again. This allows the blind, purposeless churn of evolution to uncover off-the-wall, brilliant solutions that human engineers can barely even comprehend. Nature experiments through endless cycles, gradually paring away the non-functional stuff until an incredibly complex working system naturally emerges. Which brings us to our grand finale, Part 4, Reasons Without Reasoners. How a universe of mindless physics actually created purpose and meaning.
We have to talk about teleology. Teleology is simply the explanation of phenomena by the purpose they serve. The why. Why does a heart exist? To pump blood. Why does a bird have wings? To fly. Many people assume Darwin dealt a death blow to teleology, basically destroying the why of the universe. But the truth is actually much more fascinating. The biosphere is utterly saturated with real design and real purpose. Darwin didn't destroy the why. He just explained exactly where it came from.
So the crucial point is grasping this stark contrast between how come and what for. If you ask, how come an ice cube floats, the answer is just a blind narrative of physics and water density. There's no ultimate purpose to it, it's just raw cause and effect. But if you ask, what is a mousetrap for, you get a justification, a reason. It has a spring for the express purpose of catching a mouse.
Evolution is the magical algorithmic process that bridges these two completely different worlds. It literally transforms mindless, how-come chemical causes into brilliant, what-for biological reasons.
Think of it as the timeline for the evolution of why. Let's walk across this deliberately. Back in the abiotic era, there were absolutely no reasons, just weather, mindless chemical cycles, and how-come physics. Then, moving into the prebiotic era, we start to see differential persistence. Certain chemical structures simply survived longer than others by sheer blind luck. But as these structures began to actively reproduce in the biological era, a major shift happened. Natural selection took over. It began endorsing features because they were better at surviving. It selects traits for a specific reason, effectively acting as an automatic reason finder without ever needing a conscious mind to actually understand the reason.
This is what we call Darwin's strange inversion of reasoning. Before Darwin, humanity universally believed that to get a brilliant, purposeful design, you absolutely needed a brilliant, purposeful mind at the top dictating the design downward. Darwin inverted this entirely. He proved that absolute ignorance at the very bottom, operating through the slow, mindless algorithm of natural selection, can bubble up and artificially build absolute genius. Evolution tracks reasons, it builds exquisite biological machinery, and eventually, over billions of years, it engineers a brain capable of utilizing thinking tools to actually understand its own origin.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you to ponder this. You are the magnificent result of billions of years of completely blind research and development. But unlike the simple, single-celled organisms that started this wild journey, you're equipped with the most powerful thinking tools the planet has ever seen. In a world built by unthinking, blind processes, you are uniquely capable of understanding the space of reasons. So, how will you choose to define the purpose of your own conscious mind?